One of the more interesting storylines in the offseason is going to be Winnipeg. So I've talked about teams that are in cap hell. This one's unique. Of all the teams I've covered so far, it's very unique because of just how many players Kevin Cheveldayoff has to negotiate with. And the question becomes one of, hey, Kevin, why didn't you guys figure this out during the season with any of them? He's got a lot of work to do. And we'll see how many guys stick around and how many don't. Their record this year was 47, 30, and 5. They ended up with 99 points. Of course, they lose in the first round against St. Louis. And what's the worst thing about that loss was they lost all 3 games at home. All of them. And, you can say whatever you want about how great St. Louis played, but on the Winnipeg side of things, you can't lose 3 games in a row at home. You just can't at this time of year. Last year they were 52, 20, and 10. They finished with 114 points. But I thought, and I ignored it, but I thought, that Vegas in that third round loss, in beating them in games 2 through 5, kind of exposed some fragile nature to the Winnipeg Jets, but we all kind of agreed during the summer, all right, but they're the favorites to win the Stanley Cup and everybody loved them. But the season before that 114 points, they finished 40, 35, and 7 with 87 points. And they missed the playoffs that year in large part because their goaltending wasn't very good. So Connor Hellebuck didn't have a great season 2 years ago, and the idea was, okay, and we'll bring in Steve Mason, and that'll help spell him off a little bit. And Mason didn't work out very well either. Mason ends up out. But last year, everything was great, right? Last year, everything was great. 114 points. They're right behind the Nashville Predators for that President's Trophy, and yet they're out in the third round. But again, that 114 points, I think we kind of got focused on that and said, you know what, this team is going to win a Stanley Cup. And I think, too, with people when they pick Stanley Cup champions, I think now we're kind of looking at the Canadian teams and saying we really want to see a Stanley Cup in Canada. So I expect, like this summer, towards the end of the summer when everybody's making all their predictions, I expect to see Calgary get some votes for Stanley Cups. I expect to see Winnipeg get votes again. I expect to see Toronto get some votes for Stanley Cup champion because, again, for those of us in Canada, and I think there's those in media that fall into this too, we want so badly to see a Canadian team win that we don't see some of the reasons why they don't necessarily get there. Goals for Winnipeg was 7th. Goals against, they were 15th. And people will point out, and they're right, there's a lot of parity in this league. It didn't work out for Winnipeg on the positive side this year. Now, for me, where Winnipeg started making me nervous, and I can trace it back to the game, is January 8th. They got a 7-4 win against Colorado. And Winnipeg fans got mad at me when I did the review that night, because I basically said Winnipeg shouldn't have won this game. And it was at home against Colorado, a Colorado team that was in free fall at the time. They were outshot by Colorado 41-21 that night. The score was 2-0 in their favor, then it was 2-1, then it was 4-1 in their favor, then it was 4-3 going into the third period. They extended to 6-3, and then Colorado scores to make it 6-4 before they get the empty netter to make it a 7-4 game. But at no point during this game did Winnipeg feel like, to me anyways, did it feel like they had this game under control. It felt like it was being dictated to them by the Avs. And when you look at where the Avs ended up in the playoffs, it probably was being dictated to them. And for Winnipeg, again, they were winning a lot of games at that time, but that was the first one I saw that I said, wow, they're not playing very well. And people took offense with me saying it, but after that, February 14th to 26th, they lost 5 out of 6. And then going into the playoffs, from March 20th till April 6th, they'd lost 6 out of 9. So the reason that one of the few series I got right in the first round was St. Louis over Winnipeg wasn't because I was cheering for the Blues. No, I wanted to see Winnipeg get into at least the second round. But I didn't see how this team that had fallen so far during the regular season, and we had watched them fall, was going to get it all together. It seemed like there was something that just wasn't right. And I had that feeling throughout the season from January 8th on, and it just didn't feel like something was right with Winnipeg. Now, we can debate whether or not Paul Maurice plays a role in that. We can debate whether or not he actually adjusted to anything St. Louis was doing well enough to counter it, and just how much of a leash he's going to have next season So if these guys get off to a slow start, does Paul Maurice end up on the chopping block? So there's a lot of question marks. And the biggest question mark is this. Kyle Connor had 34 goals and 32 assists this year. Patrick Laine had 30 goals and 20 assists. Which player's more talented? I would argue Laine's got talent absolutely above and beyond 95% of the league. But Kyle Connor is an extremely hard worker, and when they needed a big goal during the season, it felt like it was Connor providing it. Now, at the end of the year, Connor only gets 4 more goals than Laine, but what are they worth? Because if you're going based on potential, if you're going based on the wow factor, I saw it personally when we went to the Vancouver-Winnipeg game. I was surrounded by Jets fans. I was the only one wearing a Canucks jersey in that area. But we watched Laine get a hat trick, and Laine's fantastic when he's on. So the question really, the multi-million dollar question is, what are you paying him this summer? And how does Connor get paid as well? But they're not the only ones. Now, they've only spent for next season $55.6 million out of 83. So you can look at that and go, well, now 83 is the probable. That's why there's a question mark. It's probably an $83 million cap. So you can look at that and go, all right, well, they got $27 million. They're fine. That's going to get eaten up quickly. Now, in UFAs, Kevin Hayes is probably gone. I can't see a situation where Hayes would necessarily come back. And I honestly, next year, I would hope that they're not in the rental business for another center. Fix your center position. This is 2 years in a row. Last year it was Stastny. This year it's Hayes. Clearly, there is a perception that there's a problem down the middle for Winnipeg. Fix it. Find a way to fix it. Use your situation with the cap and with all these contracts this year and find a way to fix it. Don't just bring in these rentals every year, because you're throwing away first round draft picks, which is going to hurt your prospect pool at some point soon, and you're still not getting Stanley Cups. Now Tanev is UFA this summer. He'll get a raise. I would think he may be one of those guys who ends up getting a raise that, and it depends whether he stays in Winnipeg or whether he goes, but he may end up being one of those guys who ends up being slightly overpaid for the offense he ends up providing. The work ethic's going to be there. The physical side's going to be there. And yes, as a fan of Vancouver, I would love to see him in Vancouver playing with his brother. Par Lindholm, likely gone. Tyler Myers is probably on his way out. He made $5.5 million this year. And in the early part of the year, you could ask, what's he doing for his $5.5 million? And by the end of the year, you're saying, this guy's a bargain. Let's hope we keep him. It's going to be tricky, because Myers can make a lot of money. He is a big physical defenseman who's good on the puck, and he's really good at pretty much everything. So he is going to make a lot of money this summer. And even though there's that $27 million, that's going to get eaten up by other players. Sherratt, he may very well get a raise this summer. I thought Ben Sherratt was one of their best defensemen a lot of nights this year. And you need that physical aspect on the blue line. And then there's Kiselevich, who they didn't really use a whole lot after they picked him up. And I don't know that he's necessarily going to be a part of their plan going forward, or if he ends up leaving the NHL this year, or this summer. Now on the restricted free agent market, Andrew Kopp, who's got arbitration rights, probably not going to get a huge raise, but he'll get something. He played pretty darn well this year. And there's Laine and Connor. And what are they worth? Can Kyle Connor end up being an 80-point guy? Yeah, absolutely. He's fantastic. And the thing for me, the difference maker for me between Laine and Connor is this. Laine's got the talent in spades, but there are times where he's invisible out there, or where you watch a play and you go, okay, so he's not getting the goals, and defensively, he was out of position there. Now, he's not being paid, he's not a superstar for his defense, but when you're not scoring, that becomes more apparent. Connor does a little bit of everything. So no matter what kind of play you're looking at, Kyle Connor is going to be prominent, and usually for a good reason. So to me, personally, I would think Connor's worth more money than Laine right now, but I would totally understand people arguing with me about that and saying Laine is going to be fantastic, because he could score 50 next year, but he could score 25. And again, Cheveldayoff has to ask that question. How much is he worth, and what do I want to do? Jacob Trouba. Trouba's had contentious negotiations with the Winnipeg Jets for... we know they were contentious last summer. I'm pretty sure they were contentious the year before. So this, at least the last time before that, Anyways, there just feels like there's this disconnect between what Trouba thinks he's worth and what the Winnipeg Jets want to pay him. The thing is, Trouba got a lot of points this year. Trouba finally came into his own this year. He can sit down now with an arbiter and say, you know what, I'm worth a lot of money, and the arbiter would say, I'm with this guy. He's worth a lot of money. So Winnipeg is in trouble here because, again, that 27 million is going to get eaten away quickly. Absolutely get eaten away quickly. Beaulieu, who has arbitration rights as well. I thought he played better with Winnipeg than he did with Buffalo. I thought it was a refreshing start for him. Sometimes that's what a player needs. And he looked pretty darn good on that blue line, and I think they'll try to keep him. Joe Morrow, he's not going to get a huge raise if he wants to stick around, and I think that feeling will likely be mutual. Then he'll probably still be a Winnipeg Jet next year. And Laurent Brossoit, there's a lot of... the funny thing was, at the end of the year, I heard a lot of comments like, well, Brossoit's not going to be back. He's going to be looking for a big raise based on this year. I'm not 100% sure on that. Yes, he played very well. He didn't play a ton of games. I don't think that the sample size is so large that he can command a huge increase in his salary. So we'll see where his cap hit ends up. But honestly, personally, I think if they want to keep him, they can. And they may very well be looking at keeping him because I don't know how sold they are on anybody behind him in their organization right now, at least as far as NHL-ready goaltenders goes. Now, with all of these players and all of that uncertainty, for kids, you've got Christian Vesalainen, who came in and played a bit this year and then didn't want to go to the American League, goes to Jokerit instead. It's all fine. It's all water under the bridge because they're going to need him this year. So hopefully he's more ready this fall than last fall and he can jump right in. Samu Niku. I like Niku a lot. I think there's a lot of potential there. With the amount of ice time he doesn't seem to get, it makes me wonder if maybe Paul Maurice doesn't like him. Maybe there's a defensive aspect of his game that he doesn't have any faith in. But I think Niku has got a really solid offensive upside, and I'd be interested to see what he could do over a full 82-game schedule with that. Mason Appleton, very solid, hard-working prospect that played pretty darn well when given the opportunity this year. I don't know that the offensive upside is there, but you're not going to have that with everybody. Winnipeg has a lot of scoring depth, so you don't really need that a whole lot from him. You just need that hard work, and he has that. Eric Comrie is where you have that question mark. Eric Comrie's 23 years of age. He's a restricted free agent this summer as well. He's got arbitration rights, but he doesn't really have a whole lot of resume work at the major league level to say I warrant a raise. So I don't get the feeling that the Winnipeg organization has a whole lot of faith in Comrie coming up and being the backup. That being said, it could happen. They could move on for Brossoit. They could bring in Comrie and say that's the backup. The problem could come in pretty darn quick if Paul Maurice doesn't have any faith in him either, and we end up with a situation like what we had in Vegas, where Marc-Andre Fleury was played way too often. And if we have that in Winnipeg with Hellebuck, I think we've seen with Hellebuck, he does tend to wear down a little bit over a season if he plays too much. Tucker Pullman is another one in their prospect pool that they may very well bring up and give him a shot. Because, again, I don't know that $27 million is going to cover all the big names on this list. In fact, I'm pretty sure it won't cover all the big names on this list. I would expect this cap space to disappear quickly, dwindle quickly. And they are definitely in cap hell. They're there. What they do with these contracts moving forward is going to be a big deciding factor as to whether or not they can get back into a contender spot or not next year. And you know, we can have the debate about, you know, the whole parity thing and, oh yeah, no, still a contender, and oh yeah, you know, you don't need to talk like that because Winnipeg's going to be great next year. But they did drop by 15 points, and it did feel like in the second half of the season that there was just something missing. And now they have to try to keep everybody together or figure out who can go, who can stay. Does Kevin Cheveldayoff look at a couple of these guys in line for big raises and say, you know what? I need help in other parts of my organization. I do need to fix my depth down the middle. I could probably use some more depth on the blue line. Let's see what we can do. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing right through, just tap it upon this video. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.